Hi, everybody. We are so thankful to have you here on the line with us today. We are bringing in many experts around financial aid and the FAFSA for a Q&A panel. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started today. If you have a question, please type it in the comments, and that will be sent to us, and we will answer those in the order that we receive them. So we'll pass off those questions to the right panelist and have them answer what you're putting in. And then I want to talk today about our partners on the screen. So we've combined a lot of efforts and brought a lot of people together today to put this together. So on the screen, you'll see we have folks from ICAN, from Iowa Private College Association, and from Iowa College Aid. So we're all here today to help answer your questions around FAFSA and financial aid. Some things to note before we get totally into this. There may be some delay, so just your patience is very much appreciated throughout this process. It's the first time we've done anything like this, so it's pretty exciting, but we don't know what the technology will bring to us. So please bear with us if we're delayed or blurring out or whatever it may be. Your questions will be answered in the order that we get them. We have designated about an hour and a half of time to answer questions, so we'll be on the line for quite a bit, and we hope to get through all of your questions through that time. And this call is being recorded, so if you miss anything or have to jump out a bit early or you're joining in a little bit late, it will be recorded and you can access that link through any of our Facebook pages. And lastly, our purpose here today is just to help you get your questions answered. Apologies. So after this, I'm going to have everybody on the panel introduce themselves, and we'll go from there. So Andy, do you want to take it and kick us off?
You bet. Hi, everybody. My name is Andy Baumert. I'm Vice President for the Iowa Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. So that's 25 colleges and universities in Iowa that are nonprofit and independent. And delighted to be here with our partners at ICAN and the College Student Aid Commission. Thank you.
Awesome. And then we're going to jump into Iowa College Aid folks on the call. Elizabeth, can you take it off?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Yaddof. I also work for Iowa College Aid, like Jamie said, and I manage our statewide texting program, and I serve as the virtual coach that assists students through that college transition. So students are able to get reminders for things like the FAFSA, completing college applications, registering for the ACT, things like that. And on top of that, we also act as a one-on-one coach for students that they can get questions answered, get some sort of college advice, things like that, all via text message. So this service supports both high school and college students as well as parents. So if anybody is interested in signing up for the texting program, we will make sure to put a link in the comment section as well. So through the texting program, I also get to work with our Future Ready Iowa Last Dollar Scholarship recipients, which essentially is a scholarship program for students that are going into a high demand job field at an eligible school. They receive a scholarship that covers the gap between state and federal aid and their tuition and fees. So all the community colleges in Iowa participate in this program, as well as 2 private schools, which are St. Luke's and Mercy College here in Des Moines. Eligible programs include anything from nursing, welding, your agricultural programs, along with IT programs, just a whole variety of different programs that are qualified under this program. So I'd be happy to answer some questions along that, along those Last Dollar Scholarship program as well. So that's what I have.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. And Julie Voss, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jamie. My name is Julie Voss. I also work at the Iowa College Aid Commission in Des Moines. I want to welcome everybody to this event today. I work on the scholarship and grant team at Iowa College Aid, and we are a team of folks that manage about a dozen different scholarship and grant programs. We also have a handful of student loan repayment programs. Once students graduate from college, the financial aid doesn't end. We do have some programs that will help pay back those student loans in particular professions, and be happy to entertain any types of questions that you may have about our state scholarship and grant programs.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. And then I forgot to introduce myself. I am Jamie Covell. I run the Course to College program through Iowa College Aid. So for many high school students, they might see this program being implemented in their school. One really cool thing that we do is we run a FAFSA report for every public high school in the state. And that lets the counselor know which students have completed or not completed a FAFSA. So if you're sitting out in the audience and wondering if that's done or not, I would suggest to connect with your counselor. They will let you know if anything is missing to be completed or to help you get that completed as well. So just an FYI, every school does get that information. And then Eric, I'm going to pass it over to you now.
All right, thanks, Jamie. My name is Erick Danielson. I'm Vice President of Programs with ICAN, Iowa College Access Network, and we're a nonprofit that helps students and families through the financial aid and career and college planning process. In the comment section, as we're going along, some of the things that we're going to put in to there is what you would need to file the FAFSA form or ready to file the FAFSA sheet for this 2020-21 FAFSA form, the school year there, which would include like 2018 tax information is what you would need to fill it out. We're also going to have some information within there where even after today, if you weren't, maybe some people might not view this online, filling it out themselves, getting questions answered, get stuck and need help. We're doing virtual appointments on Zooms with families that can set up an appointment with us. We'll send you a Zoom invite and then you'll share your screen. And as you're filling out the FAFSA, we can look and see what you're entering and help you answer those questions as you're going along. It's really, we're in this new, right now, a new normal. Hopefully it won't be always this same way, but it's been amazing how everybody has seemed to come together and with this event today, I really appreciate the private association of Iowa Independent Colleges and Iowa College Aid having us come on here to be able to talk about any questions that students and families may have.
Thanks, Eric. That's I can only echo that too. And then John, I'm going to pass it over to you to close us out with introductions.
Great, thank you. Well, my name is John Holland. I'm a student success advisor with ICAN. And ICAN has actually been around now for a little bit over 20 years, and I've been working there for just about that same amount of time. So I appreciate you having ICAN be a part of this program today. And I'm going to be here to talk a little bit about some financial aid information on the FAFSA and hopefully to answer a few questions.
Awesome. Eric or John, did one of you want to kick us off talking about parent independent status? I know there are
absolutely. I can. I'm going to talk about the independent status, which will kind of transition into John talking about what parent information needs on the form. One of the things with the FAFSA form that is going to be asked to students are questions that will determine whether or not they're dependent or independent from needing parent information on the form. And basically what these questions are trying to determine is if in the next school year, so let's say you're a student filling it out right now, if in the next school year for the 2021 school year in college, you're going to be either 24 years old, married, if you're married, supporting a child over half their support, being a veteran or in the armed forces for purposes other than training. If you, up until the age of 18, were I should say at any time after the age of 13, if you were in foster care or ward or dependent of the court, if both your parents were deceased, or if you were designated in a homeless situation, an unaccompanied youth in a homeless situation by a school liaison or any other entity, agency, homeless shelter designation, runaway youth center designated in that area. If you answer yes to one of those questions as a student, you would be independent and would not need parent information on the FAFSA form. Now, the majority of high school seniors, and even once they get into college, if they go on to college right away after high school, are more than likely going to answer no to all those questions. And when you answer no to all of them, then you're still going to need parent information on the FAFSA form. One of the things I like to mention early, we might mention later on, is that there will be some families that ask, well, what if we, parents that'll ask, what if we make a student not claim them on their income taxes during a tax year? Will that make them an independent student? For FAFSA purposes, it will not. They have to be one of those things that I mentioned with the way the questions they're asked. They have to be able to answer yes to one of those questions. And if they don't, then they're still dependent and will need parent information on the form. It does not matter whether or not you claimed them on your income taxes anymore. I guess back in the 80s, that was a different story. But about the end of 80s, beginning of the 90s, that certainly had changed. And so for the parents that are wondering about that, one reason why we like to tell you is fill out your taxes the way it would best advantage your tax situation, not trying to make you student independent, because that's no longer the case. So if you are independent, or excuse me, if you are dependent and will still need parent information, then John was going to talk about how that is determined and information would need to be used on the FAFSA form.
Sure. So once it's determined that a parent's information has to be used on the FAFSA, in other words, that the student is what we call a dependent student, then the parent's information has to be provided. So if the biological parents are living together, whether they're married or not, if they're living together, then that's pretty straightforward. That's whose information goes on the rest of the application. But it can get just a little bit tricky if there's been a divorce or a separation situation. So the directions on the FAFSA tell the student that if the parents are divorced or separated, then the student would be required to use the parent's information of the parent that the student lived with the most the previous 12 months from the date of application. So let's say, for example, that a student is filling it out the FAFSA today. They can still fill it out today, by the way, for this coming fall, but ideally they would have filled it out a little earlier. But at any rate, in this example, the student is filling it out today, April 15th. And in this example, the parents are divorced. So the student would need to figure out which parent did I live with the most from this April 15th to the last one, and that's whose information goes on the application. But then the directions go one step further and they say, as of today, the day you're filling out the application, is that parent remarried? And if so, that parent plus the current spouse's information is used. It doesn't matter what a divorce decree says. It doesn't matter who claims a student on the taxes. It's strictly who did that student live with the most the previous 12 months. And if that parent is remarried, that parent plus the current spouse's information is used. Now, let's say, for example, that it's a single parent household. We'll say that the student lives with the father, for example, and he's not married. So then wherever it says parent or parents in that example, that would be the father, and the application won't even show questions about the mother in that situation, because FAFSA on the web has what they call skip logic. So they'll ask the student certain questions. Depending on how they answer those questions, then it might skip questions later on. So that's where it can get just a little bit tricky. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of confusion on which parent's information is used in the case of a divorce or separation situation. And I get a lot of parents in my office where I'll use the example of a father coming in, for example, and he'll say, well, I know my information goes on the FAFSA as a parent because I claimed my son on my taxes last year. That has absolutely no bearing on whose information goes on the FAFSA. It's strictly what I mentioned. Now, if the student did not live with either parent more than the other the previous year, again, in the case of a divorce or separation situation, then maybe the student lived on their own, for example, or maybe they lived 50-50 with each parent. Then the application tells the student that if they didn't live with either parent more than the other, they would be required to use the parent's information of the parent that provided most of the support during the last year or when support was last provided. So support could include things like, help with rent, tuition, food, insurance, for example, cars, those kinds of things. Now, notice that I mentioned, though, it's not just the last year, it would be or when support was last provided. So theoretically, if the student hasn't lived with their parent for, 10 or 15 years, for example, maybe they live with someone else, if the parents are not together and the student is required to use parents' information, it would go back to which parent provided support when support was last provided. So it can get just a little bit tricky. So I know people make a lot of assumptions on the FAFSA, and if you ever have questions on whose information is to be used, especially in a divorce or separation situation, contact the college or university. contact someone at the commission, contact someone at ICAN. That's what we're all here for, is to help you with those questions.
Jamie, could I hop in here for a second?
Sure. Yep.
Thank you. You probably all noticed that we're having this event on April 15th, being tax day. We wanted to do this in one way to remind you about deadlines. April 15th is a very well-known deadline. There are deadlines that are associated with filling out the FAFSA as well. And while some tax deadlines have changed, the FAFSA deadlines have not changed at this point. We haven't gotten to that point yet in Iowa, so it's still coming up. If you haven't filled out your FAFSA as a student or as a parent helping your student, there's still time to do that in Iowa to get that done. But for many students, for many parents, because of the current pandemic situation, their financial circumstances have changed. You know, maybe you filled out the FAFSA last fall already, October, November, and things have changed a lot financially for your family. Or, and maybe you already got your, some communication from your target college or university that laid out what your financial aid package is going to be, but now your circumstances are different. Or you haven't filled out the FAFSA yet, and things have changed, and maybe you are eligible for some financial aid that you thought you might not have been eligible for. One of the things that we would advise students to do in that circumstance is, particularly if you already have a school that's identified, one of our member schools, for example, I'll only speak about our member schools. The best thing to do if you have questions about your specific situation, John mentioned contact ICAN, contact the College Student Aid Commission, but also contact the financial aid offices at your school itself, particularly if you've already identified which school you want to go to, or a small number of schools that you want to go to. You can share their information. They're very good at helping you adjust and adapt to changing circumstances in your specific circumstance. I think we may be able to put up a list of the financial aid offices, the phone numbers that you can call at our member institutions. If not, we'll certainly put those on the iowatuitiongrant.org website. So, Jamie, I just wanted to jump in there to build on some of the things that John and Eric said. If you have some questions and you know the school or schools that you're really interested in going to, go straight to the financial aid office there, and they can help you adjust to any changing financial circumstances that you might be experiencing in your family. So thanks very much for letting me jump in there, Jamie.
Yeah, no problem.
Can I just emphasize that point?
Yep.
In fact, what Andy's saying, if you have a change in your circumstances, they're going to be the only ones being able to make that professional judgment. You are correct. So, like where we could answer questions about certain things, when it gets into if parent have lost a job, for example, during this time, or eventually, even if it hasn't happened yet, but happens later, I just want to emphasize Andy is right. The only one that can make professional judgments on that for you will be the colleges themselves.
And again, we'll make sure that we get posted someplace where it's easily available to you. So you have the phone number for the financial aid office at that college or university that are members of our association. There's 25 of them. And you can call directly. That is the office number, exactly where you need to go. It's not an operator general number. It's the financial aid office at those member schools. So if you can't find it as part of this event posted someplace, we will have it at iowatuitiongrant.org. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you both. Same, can't echo that enough. If there's particular questions regarding COVID or any other financial situation, the best scenario is to check in with your financial aid office, because they are the ones that have that power to change things for your particular case. One other thing I wanted to mention that we see often is the correct FAFSA to be filed. So remembering you want to fill out the FAFSA that corresponds with the year that you're going to need the aid for. So for example, this year would be the 2020-2021 FAFSA, not the 2019-20 FAFSA. So we see that happen a lot with students. They might complete a FAFSA for the year that they're currently going to school in, but not for the year that they need the aid for. So just to toss that out there, be sure to look at the FAFSA that you're filing and ensure that it corresponds to the year that you need the aid for. Okay, I'm waiting for some questions to come in, but in the meantime, I have a few in front of me that I could ask to get us rolling. So let me see here. I'm just going to pick one at random. Okay, Julie Voss, this one's for you. Are state scholarships renewable, and will students be reminded to apply next year or to reapply?
Yep, thanks, Jamie. Most of our programs are renewable, provided that the student continues to meet the eligibility requirements for that particular scholarship or grant. And the second half of your question of will they be reminded to apply again, in certain situations, yes. And so I'll have to give you the more long-winded answer to this question rather than the short answer to the question. So about half of our scholarship and grant programs simply require the FAFSA to apply for that scholarship or grant. If you are receiving one of those scholarship or grant programs, you won't be reminded by us. We feel like the financial aid community as a whole does a really good job of letting students know when the FAFSA application cycle has opened and when it's time to apply. So we trust that students will hear from college financial aid offices, from academic and financial counselors, from classmates, even from professors. So we trust even parents will remind them, hey, it's time to do the FAFSA. If the student is a recipient of one of our scholarships and grants that requires a separate application, some examples of what I'm talking about would be the National Guard Service Scholarship, the Education and Training Voucher Grant, the All Iowa Opportunity Scholarship. Those populations will receive specific targeted reminders from us that it is time to reapply in order to renew your award.
I might mention for need-based programs like the Iowa Tuition Grant, there are, somebody from the commission can help me out, but about 10,000 of those grants get made every year to students in Iowa. That is a need-based program, and so if your financial circumstances change from one year to the next, and for a lot of us they do, that financial need criteria has to be met each of your years. You can receive it all 4 years of your college career, but if your financial circumstance changes up or down from one year to the next, you do have to make that application again. And as Susan mentioned, the financial aid offices at our member schools are pretty good about staying in touch with students. If you're a freshman and in your sophomore year you need to apply again, the financial aid office will help you remember to do that. And it's not just that maybe you have more resources now and now you don't qualify, but for a lot of families you may have less resources, or some other eligibility criteria might have changed. Maybe you have a younger sibling that's now in college, and that changes your family's expected financial your EFC from the FAFSA form, and maybe now you are eligible for the Iowa Tuition Grant or some of the other grant programs where you might not have been the first year you were in school. So good question and good reminder that eligibility for the need-based programs does require you to demonstrate that need every year, but you can get it all 4 years.
Awesome. We do have a question that came in. Can undocumented or DACA students file the FAFSA? Eric or John, would either one of you want to take that question?
I can take that one. I'll just say that this is one of the areas, if a student is undocumented or DACA status, we would encourage them to check with each individual college that they're looking at whether or not they want them to fill out a FAFSA form. Those students right now would not be eligible for state of Iowa aid or federal student aid either. So filling out the FAFSA form might not really help them out in any way where they wouldn't need to fill it out if the college where they're going to doesn't want it. Now, if the college does want it for other reasons and wants the information to give their institutional aid, or they're applying for a scholarship that would like to have the information, then we encourage them to be able to do that. In fact, DACA students, they can get an FSA ID to electronically sign the FAFSA form. They can get one using the Social Security number that's been given to them for DACA purposes for that reason. So I guess the answer to the question, I would say it depends, and we would encourage you to check with the college or university that you're looking at whether or not they want you to fill it out, or if you happen to know of a scholarship that you're trying to apply for that requires it, then that could be another reason to do it. I do want to mention that in the past, there have been some students worried about filling out the FAFSA form that are in that status. I guess my suggestion is, if a college, university, or somebody wants you to go ahead and to do it, you are in, for lack of a better word, you're in the system anyway by being involved or being in DACA. And so there shouldn't be any issue right now or anything with filling out a FAFSA form if a college, university, or scholarship would want you to do that. Again, just at least what we're talking about, at least as of right now.
Thank you. Okay, I have another question here. What if a student isn't sure they want to start college in the fall? Should they wait until they decide to file the FAFSA? I'm going to jump in on this one, and then John or Eric, if you want to echo off of me, please feel free to. I would say yes, just because if you are unsure yet, it's good to know what your financial aid options are. So filing a FAFSA could actually provide you with a sense of what you have available for funds and help you make that decision. So it's always dependent on the situation that you're in, but that could offer some decision-making help with that. Eric or John, do you have anything to add to that?
I would agree with what you said, Jamie. The other thing is, when a student completes the FAFSA, it doesn't mean they have to go to college. It doesn't bind them or anything like that, but it does give them that option to help get some funding to pay for college if that's what they end up doing. So no, it doesn't hurt. I will mention also, though, that when a student does apply and fill out the financial aid application, they do have to list at least one college on the FAFSA. They can't just fill it out and not list any colleges. They have to list at least one. And then if they change their mind at a later date and maybe want to look at another college, they can always add a school later.
Right. The benefit of filling it out early is the aid pots that are available. So if you're filling it out early, there's more opportunity for that. So that is another reason why I mentioned it's still good if you don't know yet, just still fill it out, because you might have more eligibility at an earlier time than if you were to wait, say until August, if you decided to go, and then August you're filing your FAFSA, but it's getting toward the end of that FAFSA cycle. So those monies have already been divided up. Okay, I'm going to go on to our next question here. What if a mother says she doesn't want to be involved with her son's FAFSA? John or Eric, would either one of you want to take one of those?
I can do that one. If a mother is supposed to be responsible for filling out the FAFSA form, if she's the parent that is supposed to be filling it out and says no, one of the first things I would try to tell the parent would be, remember, by including your information on the form, it does not hold you to have to pay a dime for your student's education. And so it'll only help the student by filling it out. Now, if they say, well, I just don't want to share that information, again, I'll come back to it. You're kind of in the system anyway. It's not going to be shared beyond the school and getting an expected family contribution number. And there's so much security that's involved that I see no issues with that if that is the concern. I guess the other point that I like to mention with it, unless a student can answer yes to one of those dependency status questions, they are going to be dependent still. And a college cannot do a dependency override looking at a special circumstance if a parent just says, I'm not going to pay for the college, I'm not going to help out or pay for the college. Again, it does not hold the parent to have to do anything, but by including the parent information on the FAFSA form, the student would be able to get an EFC number, an expected family contribution number, the amount that the government feel this form, the reason why families are filling it out, what it determines what the family could contribute. But it doesn't mean, again, as a parent that you have to. But by getting that EFC number, it'll put the student in process to see what they qualify for federally, state, institutional aid. If a parent doesn't include that and they're just saying that they can't do it, a student isn't going to get an EFC number, and the only thing that they're going to be able to get is an unsubsidized student loan, and they might be missing out on some good institutional, state, or federal aid if the parent would just put the information on the form.
Yep, I was just going to echo that. Actually, as far, like, the worst case scenario would be to submit without that parent information, but then that hinders the type of aid that the student can receive. So that leaves them with I think just total unsubsidized loans, period, which are more expensive to take out and harder to pay back in the end. So that is the worst case possible scenario for a student, I would say, in that situation. Okay, I have another question here. If a student was involved with a TRIO program or Upward Bound in high school, but did not receive the All Iowa Opportunity Scholarship their first year in college, despite appearing to be eligible for the aid, would they still have the opportunity to receive the aid in year 2, 3, or 4? If so, what would they need to do? They've already reached out to the financial aid office. Julie Voss, would you be able to take that one?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of two parts to this answer. Unfortunately, no, the student would not be eligible to receive the All Iowa Opportunity Scholarship as a sophomore, junior, or senior in college if they did not receive it as a freshman. Part of the requirements for this particular scholarship require that the student receive the scholarship for the first time directly out of high school. So by not receiving it the freshman year of college, sophomore, junior, and senior year would not be an option. And then just to clarify maybe the first part of that question, being involved in a TRIO program absolutely gives students preference for the All Iowa Opportunity Scholarship, but we simply don't have enough money in that program to fund all TRIO students who apply. So I have no doubt that this student appeared eligible for the funds. I'm sure the student met the criteria. We simply don't have enough money to fund all eligible applicants. And frankly, that's true for pretty much all of our programs.
I would say that would be another reason where it's beneficial to apply early or get that FAFSA submitted early, just because of things like that. So.
For sure, deadlines matter.
Okay, our next question, where and when do you get the EFC number? John or Eric, can I point that one to you?
Let's take myself off mute there. I can go ahead and answer that one. When you complete the financial aid application, you answer all these questions. There's close to 100 questions on the application, and it sounds worse than it is, by the way. But once you submit the application, it goes to the Department of Education. They run it through a formula. They send the student some results in a few days, and the results show the student what their expected family contribution is. So they call that the EFC. And also, when you apply online, by the way, once you submit the application, a confirmation page comes up, and that gets emailed to the student as well. But the expected family contribution shows up on that as well. So it goes to the Department of Education first. They process it, then they forward it on to the college or the colleges that you listed on the application. So they'll use that EFC to help determine what the student's eligibility is for need-based financial aid. So I'm not really known for giving quick answers, but the quick answer to that question is you'll see it immediately, that EFC, once you submit the application.
Yep, I can, once you submit it, it's the student aid report, we call it a SAR, and it's usually in that right-hand corner. So if you were to open it as an attachment in an email or print it off, that's where you can physically find it. So that's just to echo right off of you, John. Okay, our next question, do retirement accounts qualify as an investment? Eric or John, do you want to take that one?
You want to go ahead and take that, Eric?
I can do that. We repeat the question one more time for me, Jamie? I'm sorry to make sure I...
Do retirement accounts qualify as an investment?
Retirement accounts do not qualify as an investment when it's asking about your assets on the FAFSA. Another one is the home that your primary residence that you live in would not be looked at as an asset either, but retirement accounts are not counted FAFSA form as an investment. The only place where any of your retirement money is looked at on the FAFSA form is going to be, it will ask you about what you contributed, whether the student or the parent, what you contributed untaxed into the tax year that's being asked about. So on this form this year, it's asking 2018, what did you contribute untaxed into like a 401k plan or any other retirement account. On that, I do like to point out, it is only your contribution. And if an employer matches, that's not counted. And generally, you're going to find that on your W-2 form, not in your taxes, not in your 1040, but on your W-2 form in box 12 with the code letters D, E, F, G, H, or S. It might sound sad, we know that, but we do a few hundred FAFSAs a year, so those things kind of stick in your mind. I do want to point out here in Iowa that one plan where you do not count your untaxed contribution, and that would be IPERS. Since that is mandatory, you do not have to count IPERS contributions as retirement contribution for the untaxed on the FAFSA form there. And usually IPERS here is listed in box 14 of your W-2 form on the taxes.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Your knowledge in forms is amazing.
Thank you. It makes me sad a little bit that I do know that like that, but hey, like they haven't changed much in the 20 years since I've been working. They've kind of remained the same, or the 40 years John's been working, so it's been good.
That is awesome. John, a follow-up for you for the EFC question. They asked which application, and the EFC comes from filing the FAFSA, and then you'll see the EFC on your STAR. So I'm hoping that that's answering that question, but do you have anything to add to that?
No, the FAFSA is the application that we're talking about.
Awesome. Okay, our next question, is a health savings account or a flex health plan considered an investment? And I'm going to throw that at you guys.
So the HSA, Eric, I can't remember the line number on the taxes. I believe it might be line 25 or something like that. But do you want to go ahead and answer that one?
It used to be line 25. Again, as I'm talking this does sound sad how we know these numbers. Trust me, I'm not this number guru or anything. But it used to be 25. Now on the new 1040, I can't remember the exact line number. It still could be the same. But health savings accounts are put on your taxes and is kind of a deduction that is able to be done. So that line number is counted as untaxed income. If you're able to do the FAFSA form with what we call the IRS data retrieval process, bringing it over electronically, that number actually will be captured with the IRS data retrieval. But again, short answer, yes, health savings accounts are counted as untaxed income on the health savings accounts are counted. Flex accounts are not. Flex spending accounts are not counted as untaxed income on the FAFSA form.
So to kind of clarify that though, the total value of that HSA is not considered an asset, but what you put into that HSA is untaxed income.
Yes, correct. And that, again, that number, if you do contribute to that, because there's a deduction you can do on your taxes, is on a line number which at least used to be 25 on the 1040.
I will have to look that up after this.
Jamie, I might throw in here while we're talking about the EFC.
Yeah.
When a student gets the information back that identifies what that EFC is, just to talk a bit about the mechanics of qualifying for the particular grant programs. So your EFC might be $5,000, might be $40,000, whatever it is. The individual grant programs are administered based on a target EFC. So for example, the Iowa tuition grant that I mentioned earlier, every year you at the College Student Aid Commission have to make a determination, okay, what level of EFC qualifies you for the tuition grant or perhaps some of the other grants. And so for folks that are listening and watching, that determination then depends on, well, how much money is available, how many students apply, because the commission's goal is to use all the money that's made available for those particular programs every year. And so that qualification EFC is going to vary from year to year. A year ago, or 2 years ago, for the Iowa tuition grant, the EFC had to be 13,500 or below. For this current year, it got raised to 15,000, so more students were eligible. So you're going to get your family's personal EFC number, and then for the individual grant programs, the commission is going to make determinations, okay, what's the line below which you will qualify for that need-based aid? So just to kind of talk a little bit about the mechanics of how you use that EFC to figure out what you actually qualify for.
Yeah, that's a great point too, Andy. There's, I would say that's not even limited to just ours. It's other scholarship programs too. So if you're a student out there looking at like nationwide scholarships, someone will ask for your EFC as well, and use that to help determine what they can provide. So that number is a very important number. So I'm glad that we clarified where to find it. And you can only get it by completing the FAFSA. So I'm going to go on to our other question here. Can a student receive multiple awards from the state in the same year, or are they limited to just one? If they're limited to one, can they keep the largest one? And Julie Voss, I'm going to toss that question over to you.
Certainly. Great question. And good news, no, you are not limited to just picking one award. So if the student qualifies for multiple programs, multiple scholarship programs through us, they can receive multiple. So we don't ask you which one do you want, you can receive multiple.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question we have answered already, but we'll quickly re-answer that one as well. Do retirement accounts qualify as an investment? Eric, do you want to repeat what you threw out earlier?
Sure. Retirement accounts are not looked at as an asset on the FAFSA form. The only place where retirement money is looked at is what either the student or the parent, each of you will be asked that question, what you contributed during the tax year that's being asked about. So for this year in 2018, whatever you contributed untaxed your own money into a retirement account, except IPERS or anything that's mandatory that you give. I know there's a few other plans, but IPERS is a big one as an example here in this state. But anything you voluntarily contribute untaxed into a retirement account, that you will go for untaxed income, but the entire amount of what your retirement accounts are worth are not going to be an asset on the FAFSA form.
Thank you. Okay, our next question. How should a trans student answer the question about male or female? Why does the FAFSA even ask this question? John or Eric, do you want to handle that question?
I can go ahead and answer that question. So on the financial aid application, it does ask the student if they're male or female. And for one thing, that question is not required. It's not a required question on the application, so a student could skip it if they wanted to. The reason it's asked, though, is, and when they are asking that question, by the way, it would be what gender were they born, that's on their birth certificate, were they male or female? And if a student is a male, if they were born a male, then they would be required to have registered with Selective Service if they're between the ages of 18 and 26. So that's the main reason they ask that question, is because it is a requirement for a student to get financial aid if they were born a male, that they have registered with the Selective Service if they're between those ages, or if they have a valid reason not to register, and there's certain reasons that are on the Social Security Administration's website, not Social Security, Selective Service Administration's website, as to where a student would not have to register. But that's the main reason for that. If a student skips that question, though, a college will come back, I'm sure, and ask whether they're male or female for that selective service reason.
Thank you. Our next question is, what does EFC stand for? I'm going to take that one. It stands for Expected Family Contribution, and we just use the acronym for it, EFC. So you will hear that quite often. Same with SAR, it's Student Aid Report, and FAFSA. Those are, I'd say, the top 3 acronyms that you can associate with financial aid in the FAFSA. Our next question, how do I find out if our FAFSA forms are received correctly? And you should receive confirmation through that SAR, and it will tell you if anything is incorrect, how to fix it. But Eric or John, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, when they log in with their FSA ID on the FAFSA website again, it'll tell them whether or not the application was processed successfully, or if they're missing signatures or anything else like that. But I would say the main way to find out whether everything is in order with the FAFSA and the college or colleges that they listed down would be to contact those colleges directly. They would be able to let you know that. But just to make sure that when you submit the form in, when you're done and submit it, a confirmation page will come up. It'll be emailed to you if you put down an email address, and you can always print that out as well, which we would encourage families to do. But once that is done, the front page of your FAFSA login, after you logged in with your FSA ID, will tell you whether or not it's processing or application processed successfully, and that'll give you that idea initially. But again, you can always check with each individual college if you listed more than one to make sure everything is in order with it.
Eric, what would be an average or typical turnaround time from the point where you successfully submit the FAFSA to the point where the EFC would be determined and that would be communicated through the system that you described?
Well, it usually takes, I think they still say 3 to 5 days to process, although it can be a lot quicker than that. It can be even 1 to 3 days, but I think they still say 3 to 5 days where it's processed successfully. Once you do submit the FAFSA form in and get the confirmation page, though, there is an estimated EFC number on there. And usually that estimated EFC, as long as you put in the information correctly and didn't estimate anything, that's usually dead on. But it still does say estimated EFC on there at that time. So that'll give you a good idea right away when you submit it. But the official coming back to you, the student aid report that Jamie mentioned, the results from filling out the FAFSA, that'll probably be 3 to 5 days when that's sent to you after it's been processed.
Very good. Thank you, Eric.
I'm gonna, just to add on to this conversation, it is possible that everything was submitted correctly, but you may be selected for verification. That information will come from the institution that's asking for more information. So if there's verification questions out there, you can toss them into comments as well. But that is just kind of like the next step if an institution decides to do that. Okay, our next question, do you also take into consideration the balance of a 529 plan if set up by a relative? John or Eric, would you be able to take that?
Sure, I can go ahead and answer that one. So on the financial aid application, they do ask about parents' investments and students' investments. So under parents' investments, they do include things like stocks, bonds, CDs, and they would also include if a parent owns any 529 plans for anybody else. In other words, the student that's applying for aid, the parents might have a 529 plan for that student, but if they own other 529 plans for other sons or daughters, that is included on the FAFSA as an investment. Now, if a grandparent or aunt or uncle, if another relative owns a 529 plan that they're planning on using for that student that's applying for financial aid, the value of that 529 plan does not show up on the financial aid application. So it's actually owned by the relative. It's not owned by the student. Now, the next time, though, that a student fills out a financial aid application, they do ask if the student received any monies from a non-custodial parent, or maybe a relative's 529 plan, something like that. The amount that the student actually received then would be considered untaxed income, but the total value of that 529 plan is not considered on the financial aid application. Please, if a parent owns a 529 plan, please make sure they don't list that under the student's investment though. It is a parent's investment, it's not a student investment. Now there's other kinds of college savings plans, maybe a UTMA or UGMA. Those are actually owned by the student, but the 529 plan is not. Again, long answer to a quick question there.
No, that's really excellent clarification, so I appreciate it. Our next question, if a family has a farm, but they live in town, is the farm considered an investment farm? Eric or John, would either of you want to take that one on?
Yes, I can try to answer this question. It depends. There's the short answer. I'm going to have to go a little bit longer than that. Technically, the FAFSA form, the way they ask the farm question, it's also the business question is in there, but it says, do not include a farm that you live on and operate. So when it's asking about investment farm, it says, do not include a farm that you live on and operate. So it's not only the operation on it as well. So technically, I would have to say that if you did not live on any part of the farm, so if you lived in town, yes, what you would need to include is the net worth of that, net worth value minus debt, and count that on the FAFSA form. Now, as I say that though, if you are farming, operating the land yourself, any farmland that you do not live on that you own and operate, we would encourage you to contact the college or colleges that you're looking at. The college and colleges, as we kind of mentioned earlier, are the only ones able to do professional judgments. And some of the colleges, as long as you're operating the farmland yourself, might say, we don't want you to count anything where you're operating yourself, even if you don't live on it, or they might initially have people count it, but then they take it off later, documenting the professional judgment. Colleges, though, that do that are making their own professional judgments. And so you really, if you're looking at just one college, then you only need to ask one. But if you're looking at 5 colleges, you would need to ask each college whether or not they wanted you to count in that situation, since your farmland, since you did not live on it. You could get 2 different answers, obviously, when you're dealing with 5 colleges. If that is the case, what you can do is list the net worth down, and the colleges, again, that didn't want you to count it, would want you to exclude it, can do that with their own results, which will generate a new EFC number. But it is, I guess the key that I want to mention with that is, colleges are really probably only going to look at that as long as you're operating the land yourself, and then they would need to make that judgment on there. If you own farmland that you're not operating yourself, that's going to be considered an investment farm by all colleges, and they're looking again for the net worth value minus debt on that.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, our next question. If you've received child support, but it could end during the time of processing for financial aid or prior to when your child starts college, is there a place that this would be noted on the loss of income that will happen, or will it just be shown when filing the following year? John or Eric?
Sure. This is kind of like stump the ICAN rep, I guess, or something like that. So when a student fills out the financial aid application, and I say student because it is a student application, I'm going to guess most of the time it's the parents that fill it out, but they ask all these questions, and you have to answer those questions just like they ask. So what the Department of Education is trying to do is they're trying to get a snapshot of the family situation. So they're saying, based on these answers, how much should this family be able to contribute towards a year of education? So if you're filling out the application and you're applying for financial aid for this coming fall of 2020, you are required to use your 2018 tax information. And then they will also ask questions such as how much child support, if any, did you receive back in 2018? So let's say you're filling it out today. Today is, again, April 15th of 2020. You have to list the child support that you received back in 2018. However, you know, earlier Andy talked a little bit about, and Eric brought it up too, about special circumstances, and they referred mainly to the COVID-19 pandemic, but there's other special circumstances that could happen as well. There could be medical expenses not covered by insurance, things like that. But another special circumstance could be where you contact the college financial aid office and you might say something like, well, back in 2018, I received $10,000 in child support. That's going to end, or that did end, and I'm only going to receive $3,000 this year. Can you make a change based on that? So again, that's something that the family would have to initiate with the college financial aid office. Maybe a college will take that into account, maybe they won't, but you have to bring it up and ask the college. So that's how that would work.
I echo what John is saying. The financial aid offices have to deal with these changing circumstances all the time. You know, parents get injured at work and are not able to earn money anymore, or there's an illness in the family that affects the family's income. Lots of different circumstances like that. So John's advice is right. Contact the financial aid office at the school that you're at or are planning to be at.
Exactly. Okay, I'm scrolling through here to pick up our other questions, but a comment in here to mention, you know, if you file a FAFSA, to hear back, you also have to apply for admission. So make sure that if you are filing a FAFSA, you do have to list at least one school, and to hear back from that school, you need to apply as well. So just keep that in mind if you're a student out there and you've submitted a FAFSA, but you haven't applied to a college yet, you want to get that application in. Okay, does the FAFSA change aid-wise from college to college? I have seen no difference so far. Should I expect it to change? Private school versus community college so far has been an unsubsidized loan. How do people pay $20,000 when unsubsidized loans are the only option? Probably too many questions, but does anybody on our panel want to tackle one of those questions?
I guess I would mention that with respect to the first part of the question, does the FAFSA change aid-wise from college to college? The FAFSA form itself and the EFC that is generated by the Federal Department of Education, that doesn't change from college to college. That's a federal function, and the EFC is what the EFC is. What can change from college to college is with respect to institutional aid that one college or university might offer that another college or university might not offer, and how they take into account some of the variables that John and Eric have mentioned in some previous questions. So that the amount of aid that you get, even though you're bringing the same EFC to every school, the amount of aid you get could certainly change. You may have some additional activities that you're involved in. A lot of our member institutions will provide some additional institutional aid based on your participation in choir or some research programs or sports or community activities of one kind or another. So yeah, the aid can change pretty dramatically from one school to the next, but the EFC number that you get from the Department of Education, that's the same regardless.
I will add to that, there are different types of aid that you can receive. So FAFSA, like Andy mentioned, is federal. In Iowa, if you stay in Iowa, there's state aid available for students going to school in Iowa. And then there's, you know, private scholarships, which can be a huge source as well. So if you're out applying for nationwide scholarships or local scholarships, that would be considered private aid. So private scholarships, different types of funding source. And a good thing to think about with scholarships is how long does that apply for? So if you receive a scholarship, it might only apply to that first year of college. So when you're thinking about your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth years of schooling, you need to know which scholarships can be applied to that. And there's different ones for each level that you're completing. But just keep that in mind as you're thinking about scholarships, because I know senior year it can be really easy, quick to get some local scholarships, but then thinking about how that affects your aid in the future too is good to consider.
Good point to make a distinction between private aid and either state or federally funded aid. The Iowa tuition grant, for example, the EFC qualification number for that is $15,000. It doesn't matter which of the independent colleges are going to. It's $15,000 you qualify or you don't. But the private aid, the institutional aid, that can vary quite a bit.
Yep.
So I could add a little bit to that too. Yesterday I did a webinar actually on comparing financial aid award packages, and we have that pre-recorded or recorded on our website as well if somebody wanted to watch that. But when you apply for financial aid and a college gets that information, they end up generating what we call a financial aid package that gets sent to the student. And that's what that question is referring to about the financial aid differing from college to college. So let's say a student is looking at 3 different colleges. So they know the cost of each of those colleges, but then they look at how much is that college offering. And in the question, she mentioned that the student is only being offered the unsubsidized loan, and how do people pay the $20,000 when the unsubsidized loan is the only option? So when you get those award letters, that's when you look at how much is it going to cost me out of pocket to go to these different schools, and how am I going to come up with that amount? One way to come up with it would be that student loan, but the $5,500 that a first-year student gets obviously won't cover the $20,000. But that's where, like everyone's been saying, maybe you could qualify for some other institutional aid. There's other private scholarships that are out there working to pay the balance. Maybe a student can't afford a certain college they're looking at because there's just not enough financial aid that's out there. Maybe they have to rethink what they're going to do as far as college goes. Maybe get a couple roommates or live at home to save on living expenses. So when you get those financial aid award packages, that's when you can really make an informed decision, and that's when you just kind of have to figure out how you're going to come up with that. And by the way, I do want to add too that yes, you're offered the unsubsidized loan, but there are other options out there as far as loans go. There's a parental loan, plus loan that a parent could take out for the student, and there's also private or alternative loans that usually have a better interest rate than the plus loan that students and parents can access as well. But in saying that, I also want to say that ideally you would try to keep your loan debt down as much as possible.
Thanks, John. One exciting piece for this is we've built an award comparison worksheet. So it's very specific to the state of Iowa as far as breaking down state aid, federal aid, and like we were talking about with those local scholarships, private scholarships, figuring out, basically taking your award letter, breaking it down price by price, and figuring out what that out-of-pocket expense is. So we'll be sure to pass that on as well as a tool and resource. Our next question, what if a dependent refugee student parent are still in their home country and they are selected for verification? John or Eric, do you have follow-up for that?
What I would do is if they're having trouble getting any kind of verification, because let's just say refugee for sure, but just say anybody living outside of the United States, especially right now, I would contact the colleges and work with them to see what can be done to help. I don't want to say it'll eliminate it, but work with them and telling them what the problems are in being able to get the information needed for verification. There could be that the parents, because even if they're out of the country, if the student qualifies, they're even a non-resident qualifies, being able to get federal aid from the FAFSA, and their parents live outside the country, we would need their 2018 foreign tax return if they filed taxes. But some of the parents just don't file taxes. So there might be a way of trying to get a statement somehow that they did not file. That's just one example, but that would be another area I would work with your college on directly, where the student is going, to try to get that taken care of, because that's been a problem and something that they should do anyway, let alone with what we have going on now.
I think every single one of our member institutions have students from multiple countries. And so they have been, and some more than others, have a lot of experience in dealing with sort of these cross-border issues. So yeah, again, the advice, contacting the financial aid office at the target school is a great piece of advice.
Exactly. And as a student, this is just generally, don't be afraid to ask to extend your deadline for when things need to be submitted back for. That's something that I never thought about as a student, never asked for, and it's something that colleges are willing to work with you on, especially to get you onto campus. So don't be afraid to ask that question to your financial aid office. Okay, another question here, let's see. This is just to confirm what I heard. It is recommended the student apply at a college before a FAFSA is completed. With this question, I can just say it can be a little easier, but you definitely don't have to do it in that order. You can totally complete a FAFSA without applying, but in order to get that financial aid package from the college, you'll want to apply for admission to that college. That helps clarify. Can anybody else maybe want to jump in and if I didn't do a good job there?
Jamie, can I just add a part 2 to your answer?
Yep, for sure.
Part 2 for me is, again, deadlines matter. They're not just arbitrary dates that we throw out there. So does a student have to have applied to a college before the FAFSA is completed? No. And if that means file the FAFSA to meet a deadline for a scholarship, do that. It can really be in any order, whether you file the FAFSA first or apply to the college, but keep in mind there's deadlines for every single scholarship and grant out there, and they matter.
And Julie, remind us what the FAFSA deadline is for Iowa students?
Sure. For the Iowa tuition grant, the FAFSA deadline is July 1, meaning every year by July 1st, if a student wants to be in the running for an Iowa tuition grant, we would have to see that the FAFSA is submitted by July 1st.
Great, thank you.
Awesome.
Hey, can I add just one little quick blurb on that?
Yeah,
1 year, July 1, July 1's been the state, priority date for all the years that I remember. But 1 year, working July 1, the FAFSA website went down. So don't wait till now this was quite a few years ago, but it went down. And so we had these appointments trying to get in last minute, and you couldn't get it done. So I would also encourage you to not procrastinate. If you see a deadline, maybe do it a day or two before just to make sure. But yeah, 1 year, it was down on July 1, and that was not July 1 or June 30th, whatever it was. It really caused a problem that year. So try not to procrastinate in getting it in, and on any deadline that you're dealing with. Give yourself a day or two just in case of something like that would happen.
Excellent point, Eric. And I would echo, it matters when the FAFSA is finished, not when it is started. So we had a really sad example of a family who started the FAFSA at 11:45 p.m. on June 30th, and they finished it and submitted it, on July 1st. And so the submission, they started at 11:45 p.m. on July 1st. When it was submitted, the clock had changed to July 2nd at 12:30 in the morning, and that FAFSA gets stamped July 2nd, not July 1st. So please, please, please don't procrastinate.
And maybe it's, go ahead.
You go ahead, John.
I was just going to add, maybe instead of completing it a day or two in advance, maybe 3, 4, 5 months in advance of that deadline.
Only thing I can add to the deadlines too that can be frustrating is when you do try to get it done early. October 1st is the day that it opens, and it is notorious to have issues October 1st with FAFSA and the website. So just have patience if you're doing it on the 1st or in that first week. I know it can be frustrating because everybody is trying to do it at the same time. So it gets a little bit overloaded, but keep at it. The earlier, the better. Okay, our next question. What is the Iowa tuition grant and what can it be used for? Julie Voss, I'm going to toss that over to you.
Sure.
Or Andy.
The Iowa Tuition Grant is a state-funded grant program for students who reside in the state of Iowa and also attend a private college or university in the state of Iowa. The parameters for the grant have not been set for the coming up fall semester, so I can only speak to the parameters for the current school year. And for the current 2019-2020 school year, the value of the grant is $6,000 for the academic year, so $3,000 per semester. And as Andy mentioned previously, it is a need-based grant, so the family and the student has to demonstrate financial need to receive the grant, and we measure financial need according to the results of the FAFSA. So this year we looked for an EFC of 15,000 or below in order to qualify.
I would only add that an encouragement to any Iowa student or Iowa family that's listening: take a real strong look at the Iowa tuition grant and find out if you're eligible. This is kind of the main reason that the organization I work for exists. The Iowa tuition grant was put in place a little over 50 years ago. It's a long-standing, well-established program, and the whole idea is that the state wants to make an investment in you finding the right place for you to have a good college experience. We're so lucky in Iowa that we have so many great public and private institutions where you can find the place where your learning happens best. Might be in a small college in a small town or a big college in a big town. But we have all of them in Iowa, and the Iowa tuition grant is designed to make sure that you can have some financial resources to look at the broadest part of that whole menu of options that are in front of us here in Iowa. And so that's why it was so important that the EFC was adjusted last year so that more students would qualify for that tuition grant. And it's a big program. I think 10,000 grants were made in the current academic year, or around 10,000 grants. So students from every county in the whole state have qualified for this grant. Lots and thousands of students get this grant. So I'd really strongly encourage anyone who wants to figure out what all of their options are, fill out the FAFSA so you can get that EFC, find out if you qualify for the Iowa tuition grant, and then for all the other private and institutional aid that's available to you as well. As either Jamie or Elizabeth mentioned right at the beginning, in response to a question, if you don't find out what you might qualify for, you really don't have all the information you have to make the decision about whether to go to college. I think it was either Elizabeth or Jamie mentioned that the commission has a good way of tracking how many students fill out the FAFSA from school to school. At some schools, at some high schools, almost all of the students fill out the FAFSA. At some other schools, a much smaller percentage. Unless you fill out the FAFSA, you're not going to know all of the options that are available to you. So I so strongly urge students and their families to fill out the FAFSA and find out what you qualify for. The Iowa tuition grant is one of the big ones that's very beneficial to thousands of students in Iowa, but that's not the only one.
Julie, could you talk to how to basically, once you complete your FAFSA, how do you qualify for state aid or move on to the next step in the process to qualify for state aid?
Sure. So as I mentioned previously, we have kind of a suite of scholarship and grant programs that have various criteria to qualify. Completing a FAFSA is definitely a great step one in the process. So submitting a FAFSA by the deadline, and I would point out that a July deadline is one of our later deadlines. We have some other scholarships and grants that have much earlier deadlines, specifically March 1st. So again, speaking to that procrastination issue, please don't do it. It will make us both very sad if you do. So submitting a FAFSA by the deadline, great step one. If you indicate on the FAFSA that you are a resident of the state of Iowa, the FAFSA recognizes that, and at the end of the submission of the FAFSA, it will prompt you, do you want to bounce over to your state's website and apply for other state-based scholarships and grants? So we absolutely encourage students to visit our website and do that. The Iowa financial aid application housed on our website starts off with a eligibility wizard, and it asks each student a series of screening questions to kind of narrow down, of our suite of scholarships and grants, which ones might you qualify for, and then we direct you to apply for those very specific programs. Does that kind of tackle the question that was posed, Jamie?
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. I don't have any new questions in the queue at the moment. Panelists, are there any maybe common things that you see happen that would be good for our audience to know, or maybe tips and tricks or whatever that may be?
One of the things that I think maybe Andy had mentioned it or others, was about private scholarships. High school senior right now and are just beginning your private scholarship search, you're going to find a lot of deadlines that would have already passed and been gone. I don't want to say that there wouldn't be in there, and I know a lot of places where you can look at private scholarships that are out there, a lot of free scholarship searches. I know on our website at cansucceed.org/scholarships, we're linked to some free scholarship searches, some listed, and that you at Iowa College Aid has some as well, places to be able to look for that. But so reason I wanted to bring it up, if there are any families of juniors or sons right now going into next year when they're going to be juniors or seniors, it's not too early for juniors to be looking for private scholarships. There are some that are out there for them, but definitely during this year, we want to encourage seniors to look for private scholarships and almost take it like a part-time job, where I like to say, I'm not saying 20 hours a week, every week during the year they've got to look for private scholarships, but if they took an hour or two per week over all their senior year and had a goal of private scholarship every week or every other week that they were applying for throughout their senior year, that's going to be quite a few that they apply for. And if they do that, and let's say it's 20 that they apply for, and out of that 20, they only 4 of them, because chances are you're not going to receive them all. That doesn't sound very good. I've used this example before. I joke around. That's only hitting the Mendoza line in baseball, 200. That's not good in baseball. But if you hit 200 with private scholarships, and those 4 out of 20 that you got were $500 each, that's $2,000 less that you've got to borrow or come up with out of pocket. And let's say it took you 20 hours to get those scholarships, $2,000, 20 hours, that's $100 per hour. How many students are going to be able to make $100 per hour in doing that? It can be well worth your time in looking for private scholarships. So some of them now would be past it, but for seniors that are in high school, might be past some of the deadlines. But even when you're in college, there can be places to look for out there for private scholarships too, and checking in with your colleges, the universities themselves, especially in the department that you're getting into. Not all department scholarships or private scholarships are going to be for freshmen, but they might start being more as juniors or seniors once you get more established in those departments too.
I might also mention actually making campus visits. I understand because of the current pandemic situation, that's going to have an effect on campus visit opportunities right now. But the summertime, late summertime, and then for students who are high school juniors this year or high school seniors this coming year, take advantage of those college visit days that are going to be scheduled. Really good opportunity to understand exactly and visit directly with the financial aid folks face to face, particularly if your parents are along. Really great opportunity to be able to understand how much institutional aid is available, because for a lot of the institutions, one of the criteria is GPA. For example, your high school GPA might be a criteria that a college or university uses to determine their institutional aid that they're going to provide you, irrespective of your EFC. And a great way to get to know that and also get a good feel for what the campus is like is to make a campus visit. If you're an Iowa student, particularly with our members, we have 25 member institutions. Their campuses are in 18 towns and cities in Iowa. There's one that's pretty close to you, I guarantee it. So take advantage of a campus visit too to get some of those questions answered face to face.
Thank you. Julie, we have a question about the website you were mentioning. They did answer it in the comments, but would you mind, do you know the website to use for the Iowa financial aid application?
Sure. The exact URL, I believe. Oh, and as I say that, I'm struggling to navigate to it. But if you go to our website, iowacollegeaid.gov, scroll to the very bottom of our homepage, you'll see a sitemap, and within that sitemap is a link to the Iowa financial aid application, and that's what kicks off the eligibility wizard.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another question. This one is more general related to scholarships. What websites do you recommend for scholarships? There seem to be many that aren't legit or just trying to sell you something. Is there any that any of us definitely recommend? Trying to think. There are so many out there. It can be very overwhelming, but there are scholarships for everything too. So I know this doesn't directly answer the question as far as a direct website, but you can find a scholarship for just about anything, any topic. You can get a scholarship just for filing your FAFSA through College Board. They're called Opportunity Scholarships. So just for completing steps in the college going process, you can be into a scholarship for that. But does anybody on the panel have a reputable website that they use or offer to students to use?
Jamie, we've actually vetted some. I've got a colleague who vetted some for private. So the ones that are listed on our website at icansucceed.org/scholarships are ones that we have vetted to try. I'm not going to say that there's not going to be advertisements or things that are on there, but they're more the reputable ones. Scholarships.com, if I remember right, fastweb.com, that's been around a long time. That's just a couple. There seems that there's many other ones as well. And I know it can seem overwhelming. There's so much of that out there. So I think we vetted some to be able to use, and we've still got quite a few that are listed on there. But again, you're not going to be able to do scholarship searching all in one setting. So if again a student started to create accounts now as a junior and then continued on to the senior year, you know, they're going to need to spread some of the work out. But I would utilize all of those besides their school counselors. I want to say a lot of the local scholarships are going to come due in spring of their senior year. Not all of them. There will be some before that. A lot of them will come due at that time. But looking on this national level, you know, state level for private scholarships, we'd really like to see them start some of the work, see what's out their junior year, but start their beginning of their senior year. But again, we've got some listed that we've vetted that try to stay away from what they mention out there. And unfortunately, there are scams. And that are still out there. If anybody asks you for a bank account, you know, number for a scholarship you didn't apply for, obviously stay away. And those things have even happened still here in Iowa.
Yeah.
If I could add one thing to that too, you know, Eric talked about how we vet different sites and things like that. And yes, you'll get some advertising and things, but just the way I look at scholarships, I guess, is I wouldn't pay anybody to get a list of scholarships or to apply for scholarships. There's lots of free information that's out there. So I wouldn't even pay $5 to apply for scholarships. I just wouldn't. So just another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, scholarships are free money, so you really shouldn't be paying to apply for free funds. And I would say, I mean, that's very true with FAFSA as well. There are a lot of things out there that can get you to pay for a service to help you file your FAFSA or complete it for you. It's a free form. You should never have to pay to fill it out. So just keep that in mind as well as far as any aid goes. If it's free to receive and you don't have to pay it back, then you really shouldn't be paying to receive it to begin with, if that makes sense. Okay, panelists, we are at 3:27, so we have come to basically a full hour and a half, which is really incredible, of all of these questions. So we are coming to closing we'll stay on the line for a few moments just to see if there's any wrap-up questions. But otherwise, thank you all for joining us. We've really enjoyed putting this together and sitting on here today. These questions are excellent and gives us a good idea of what to be feeding out to our crowds as well. So thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
And panelists, if you want to stay on until 3:30 to make sure we're here for anything that comes in, that's greatly appreciated.
You know, I'd mentioned just as an editorial comment for students or parents that are viewing, the folks that you saw on the panel, I'm not talking about myself, but the folks that represent the College Student Aid Commission and ICAN, we're really fortunate in Iowa to have these two organizations, a nonprofit like ICAN and a state agency like the Commission. The folks that you've been talking to and listening to on the panel, that's not a faceless bureaucracy. I mean, these are the people that operate the programs. I mean, and you can talk to them face to face. So, you know, there's no reason ever to be intimidated about trying to find out how much financial aid you might qualify for, because you're looking at the people that are operating these programs, and they're just regular folks like everybody else.
Thanks, Andy. I would say, you know, we're all here to help the student. So no matter what we can do, we're in it for all of you. And that is our job, to help you. So that's what we're here for. Awesome. And panelists, in case you aren't watching the chat, we have a great amount of thank you comments coming through, and that we all did a really nice job. So thank you all for being on here today.
Great.
Thank you. A lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yep.
This worked out great, I think.